let me give you a rough idea of where we see different maturity of enterprises when it comes to Gen AI application journey, and give you an honest feedback on what I think is required in each of these levels. Obviously, level zero is data. No need to explain too much here. If you don't have the correct data access and preparation strategy, if you're not able to leverage the inbuilt capacity of your data lake or data warehouse system, um, you would probably not be able to gain much of ROI out of investing on generative AI, to be honest, because it's all about your context. So it's a paramount story to talk about these things, to talk about different patterns as well, like service mesh or data fabric or whatever seems to be more useful in context of your organization. So this is very important. Impossible to do much without this level. Level one is, I think, something that people have experimented quite a bit with, and that most organizations are not going to gain much out of, which was like, okay, let's give people access to these models and kind of let them to bring the right context, and let's rely on them to do the prompt engineering. It was very exciting initially, but it hit a wall because it turns out that we need to have a correct way of retrieving the right information. That's why we have now seeing this explosion around the idea of retrieval augmented generation. Retrieval augmented generation is probably the most important part of a lot of generative AI applications now. So, and there are many, many different decisions to be made here. Are we going to use the frameworks provided by hyperscalers? Are we going to build our own thing based on more open source frameworks like LangChain? What's the strategy here? Whatever the strategy is, we need to invest on RAG because they're not going to go anywhere. RAG is going to vector DBs, RAG, similarity search, all these things are going to be the core part of our toolkit when it comes to actually leveraging these systems. The third level is obviously agentic RAGs. Like, so RAG is fine, but now let's use things like React to give the model the ability of thinking and selecting the right tools or right data source to provide the better answer. In this level, I think what is very important is your strategy of grounding. How do we know if the data tool or whatever the system uses the correct one? Can I cite it? Can I trace it back? What is the level of transparency in this level? And obviously, evaluation as well. How do I know if the response of the model is good enough or aligned with my strategy? So there are a lot of different things. We can probably spend hours talking about the different evaluation mechanisms, and that's often what we do. We need to decide the risks and rewards of different evaluation approaches and get to that story. Level four is about fine tuning. Now, fine tuning, it's not all about fine tuning to ask stuff without RAG. So if you look at things like retrieval augmented fine tuning kind of story in which we have the powerful RAG, and now we are trying to make it even more reliable, make it a little bit more deterministic by giving the context to the model as opposed to asking the system to pull the context every time. We are seeing a much more solid way of actually building agents, for example, by doing a little bit of fine tuning in all different models that they have. Another very important decision to make is, where are you going to run all these models? It's not only one model. And turns out that with things like Phi 3 or Llama 3 from Meta, we are now able to run a lot of these models on-prem, like on our data center, or maybe on our laptops and machines. So we need to have a hybrid AI strategy. It boils down into the governance discussion, what frameworks I'm going to use. For example, IBM has Watson X, which is a very interesting way of helping you to build that strategy. But hybrid AI seems to be very, very important part of decision makings for most of organizations that are in that level. Level five are the pinnacle of things that we can use, right? Like multi-agent systems, which are fantastic. Turns out that a bunch of GPT 3.5s coordinated correctly, leveraging things like AutoGen, which a lot of hyperscalers are now investing on, can actually outperform larger models like GPT-4. this is fantastic, right? Like they can do reflection, they can criticize the answers or the models themselves. So multi-agent is very important. That's where we probably will see a lot of interesting outputs. That's These are the things that you need to have in your organization in order to get that ROI that you require. Obviously, SLM, small language models, how do you fine tune them? How do you take them to production? What are the stories there? There's any value in building a system for pre-training very, very small models? These are discussions, depends on the organization, right? And obviously orchestration and LLM ops and how do you do observability, and LLM mesh, for example, is another example of a lot of organizations want to have all these models behind some sort of API layer. Depends on the request, giving the right model to the users that are asking them. So more of a platform way of thinking, more of democratization of these models, because we see different competency out of them, and probably we don't want to lose all those beautiful things that are happening out there because we cannot accommodate them within our organization. So I try to be very concise. Obviously, security is another aspect that is very important for all of these things. And responsible AI is a very responsible AI is not a bunch of slides, right? Like all about different APIs now we need to integrate into these systems. But that goes beyond one level or another. They're like paramount for anything that wants to go to production these days. Um, Thank you very much for listening to me. I know that this is a bit of a long video, but hopefully in the future videos we can double click on different levels, different patterns that I mentioned here, and see a bit more about them and maybe learn a bit more together. Thank you.